Where do you go when your religion crumbles and your whole world turns upside down?
What do you do when your beliefs fail you?
How do you learn to trust God again?
Join us as we pick up the shattered pieces man-made religion left behind by taking up our cross and following Jesus.
Hello, welcome to the Born Again Bakers podcast. I am Audrianna, and this is my beautiful co-host, Hannah.
Hi.
Well, we just got done with a marathon episode of myself, and I told my whole life story, but I didn't share that much about where I'm at with bread, and that's actually a huge part of my story. And Hannah and I are we've had like a very similar journey with bread. So we wanted to share kind of how we landed where we're at and some changes to my thinking that I think a lot of people will be interested in hearing. We have both gone gung-ho. Our whole personality is Jesus and fresh milled flour.
Yep.
It's what we do and talk about all day long, every single day.
Our Marco Polos are very boring. It's Jesus and bread.
Yes, and then you can hear my kids screaming in the background.
And mine.
Yeah, but yours less.
Yeah, I have like a very nosy 9-year-old that likes to just like sit and listen to what we're saying in case there's like a scoop.
Mine too. We call them the birds on our shoulders. Yeah, we Marco Polo all day long, every day, and we both make pretty much all of our bread products for our family from scratch. I am not as good about it as Hannah is. We still buy tortillas.
I just very recently gave those up against my husband's will. So.
Yeah, my husband's not down for that. He will just go buy them himself.
He got desperate enough that he went out and bought the almond flour, uncooked ones from Costco. So
hey, at least he tried to like kind of make it.
We met halfway, sure.
Yeah, he met you halfway.
I'm just not willing to sit and roll out tortillas 100 times a day.
It is an ordeal to make tortillas. And see, my husband wants the ones that are like 18 inches across. Like, I'm
Yep.
like, no, that will take me 12 hours just to roll out one.
I could do the white flour ones if it wasn't just full of, it's all the seed oils in there that bother me so much.
Yeah, so we are milling all of our own flour, and we'll maybe eventually have to go into like all the stats on why it's so much better. I first got into milling actually when I was pregnant with my fourth, so that would have been 2022, but it wasn't the only flour I was using. I was kind of adding it as a percentage into stuff. I was starting to learn about it. But in 2023, I really dug into the benefits of it. I was pregnant, and so I wasn't quite ready to just be like, I'm dropping all flour. But then actually in November, I had to go gluten-free and egg-free for my skin, and it actually made all my skin worse to go gluten-free. And eventually I told my doctor, I was like, I'm gonna ignore you and I'm going to mill all my flour. I figured that was a good like halfway point to just see, because of all the research that I'd been doing, I was really convinced that my body would be able to digest it properly and actually absorb the nutrients, and that I wouldn't have any issues with the fresh milled flour. And I was right.
Yeah, I got my grain mill in 2019 when we were still living in Arizona. And I
that's
got
a
it
long
for
time ago.
Christmas. It was a long time ago. I had been sort of wanting to dabble in it, and my husband surprised me for Christmas. I had no idea. He knew I really wanted it. He surprised me with a Como mill for Christmas. And it is the only gift to this day that I've ever opened on Christmas and cried.
That's amazing. They're expensive.
It was such an extravagant gift. We had 3 little ones at the time. I was like pregnant with our fourth. It was just like more than I would ever spend on myself on anything. And it was such an exciting gift. I used it a lot then. And then we moved up to Idaho and I still was using it, but kind of like you. Percentages, specific recipes. It wasn't everything I was doing. I was still really loving sourdough. thinking that that was the better option, but I didn't really love fresh milled sourdough, and there weren't a ton of recipes out in like 2019, 2020 for fresh milled. So I still was more sticking towards like organic, unbleached flour, white flour, rather than going into fresh milled.
Yeah, in 2022 and 2023, I was still convinced that sourdough was better even if it was just commercial flour because of the fermentation. And then I had a lot of people requesting that I do more fresh milled, and so I started doing a lot deeper research. And a lot of it was because I was trying to do this guide. So I had been developing recipes with sourdough because I was exclusively sourdough at the time. And as I was doing all this research for this guide, I realized that maybe, just maybe, sourdough isn't the only way to do it. And maybe it actually would be okay to use yeast if you're using fresh milled flour. Maybe it's the flour that is the problem and not the leavening agent and not the lack of fermentation. And I, of course, wasn't ready to like abandon sourdough. Sourdough brings me a lot of joy. But it comes in seasons because there are definitely some seasons where I just don't have the capacity to. Sourdough takes a little bit extra brain power. It is a little bit more fussy. You have to work on a specific timeline. You have to remember to feed your starter. And I have to apologize to everybody who I took this approach in teaching sourdough that was this is the best way to do it. And there were plenty of people teaching more like the loosey-goosey sourdough, which is fine. And I think I always said it was fine, but I was really, really rigid about mine. And in my teaching, I think that came across a lot more like legalistic than I intended. And I know I am to blame for a lot of people not wanting to try fresh milled flour. Because of some of the legalistic ideas that I had kind of concocted. And I did a lot of research, but there's 50-50 research for sourdough and fresh milled flour. It's not like one is alarmingly higher than the other in like statistics. And, but as I had my fourth and my fifth baby, and honestly, as I found Jesus and started to understand grace, I realized, okay, so there's actually a lot of like wiggle room here. There's a lot of gray area. And if I'm in a season that is just absolute chaos, it is better to get my family real nutrient-dense bread with commercial yeast than it is to every once in a while give them a loaf of sourdough bread, because it was getting to the point where we were buying bread because I was so sick with my skin and breastfeeding babies. And so I think that there needs to be a lot more room for grace in the bread making world, because especially as moms, we want to give our families the best food we can. But we have to make that accessible and doable within every season of life.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because I'm not even as busy as you are. My kids are a little bit older. My youngest is 5 at this point. And I'm still in a season with homeschooling and just like running the kids around, whatever it is, that it's not feasible for me to have sourdough all the time. I can't make that my whole day, and I can't always have my schedule around it. And that would get my husband frustrated when he's like, hey, but we need bread of some kind in this house. And we actually went more carnivore for like a year and more animal based. And so we were just not having a lot of bread. I would make sourdough on occasion as like a treat and to bring to functions. And then when he would get frustrated when there wouldn't be what he wanted, he would just buy it. And then that would give me like all of this shame and guilt for not wanting to make it because I'm just busy or whatever. And so it's funny how God keeps putting us in the same path at the same time.
Always.
Because I kept seeing things about fresh milled flour and Sue Becker, and I would see it and click away from it. I didn't want to, it was like you doing your research. I didn't want to do this research, and I could feel God nudging me towards it, and I was just not wanting to pull my meal back out, not wanting to worry about it, and I really didn't enjoy fresh milled sourdough, so I really wasn't interested in doing it. I like the white sourdough. It's delicious and I'm good at it, and I have my recipes I like. We have our routine, and we were mostly eating meat at this point. And so then I saw you post actually a fresh milled recipe, and it was the nudge that I needed to go listen to Sue Becker and do a massive deep dive on fresh milled. And then I texted you and I was like, are you eating bread again? Are you doing fresh milled? I have to know all these things. And so we started chatting about it.
And I hard sold you on it.
You did.
I went like full car salesman on her.
Well, your selling point really was my kids don't snack anymore, really. We're saving a ton of money on snacks because they're full. And so when you said that, my husband was out of work all summer. I mean, he was out of work by choice all summer, but we were really like tightening the reins on our budget. And so that was like, okay, if it's gonna save me money, snacks are expensive, especially like crunchy mom snacks with all these healthy things. So let's see what there is to it. So I followed your recipe. I didn't even want to ask you for a recipe. I literally like paused your YouTube video 1,000 times to write the recipe. I didn't want to bother you. So I went and made it, and it was delicious. It was like, it woke up my soul. I had been carnivore and animal based because of like all these health issues I was having, and this was a game changer. And we didn't need as much meat. My kids were full, and then my one kid particularly, who just despises red meat, which really hurts a carnivore heart, and he was eating this bread, and I wasn't forcing him to take bites of this red meat that he just despises. I'm like, yeah, oh my gosh, you can have just a roll and you're getting the nutrition that you need and your belly is full. And it was cheap to make. It was way easier to make, and it's so good.
Honestly, this is maybe a little bad looking back. I knew that was going to be the point for you.
I might be one of
I had to throw that one in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's so interesting. And you bring up Sue Becker, which I have to share a little bit of a backstory. I almost have to apologize to Sue Becker because I refused to listen to her for a long time because of my faith journey. Specifically, I was like, oh, she's a Christian. I don't know. And that's really sad looking back. And also, it's just crazy to me because she is such a wealth of knowledge. And honestly, I think it was just because that was kind of as I was starting to ask questions. And so it was kind of not really triggering, but it was like it was going too far for me to be listening to people talk about other faiths or different forms of the gospel. Anyway, if you want to hear more about that, you can go back to our other episode. But
wait, who we have to say? Sue Becker. She's Sue Becker from the Bread Beckers. If you don't know her, she's on social media. She is basically the OG fresh milled flour lady. She is incredible. Her podcast is just like a wealth of knowledge if you want to get started and understand the health benefits.
Yes, she explains it all so well. And very concisely. She makes it very doable. And I think where the fresh milled world is lacking is just on the recipe development side of it. I think for me, as kind of a baking perfectionist, like I love to experiment with baking and I love to develop recipes. And I just felt like a lot of the recipes I was trying just were not what I wanted them to be. None of them were awful, but I knew I could make them better. And so I literally was like, honey, we are not buying any more flour ever again. And he was like, are you sure? Because that seems like really diving in the deep end. And he's like, I have a problem where I make a decision and I do go full throttle.
We both do this, which is an issue when we both do it at the same time, because then we push each other even harder, I feel like.
Yeah. But then I do tend to like get burnt out. And because I go like so hard and intense for an amount of time, but I'm kind of a sickly human as I'm trying to give myself grace. But he's like, are you sure? Because I don't want you to feel bad if I have to go to the store and buy bread. And I'm like, no, like you're not going to need to because I'm going to use yeast. And We're never buying flour again. We haven't, actually. I'm very proud of myself. We have not bought flour. We really have only milled our own flour. But it was just, I dove so far down the deep end, and I developed a lot of recipes, and I figured out so many tricks, and I had done a lot of research. Like, I had done so much digging to try to find all the best ways to do things, and a lot of it I had never seen on the internet, just as I did it in practice. And it became a whole lot more enjoyable when I gave myself the freedom to use commercial yeast. The whole world opened up when I realized that it doesn't have to be sourdough. I think fresh milled sourdough is probably the best for your gut option. It is not always the best option for your season of life, for your taste buds, for your children, because there is a very small window for your fresh milled sourdough to not be great. If you over ferment it at all, it's not very good. So I think knowing how to do sourdough with fresh milled flour is an incredible skill, and I'm so grateful that I know how to do that. I have a whole guide. I actually developed a lot of recipes that are very good recipes, but it doesn't hurt to use commercial yeast. I have had no issues with my health not fermenting the bread, which was mind-blowing to me because I was convinced for so long that so many of my health issues had to do with unfermented gluten. And it's not. It's actually that you just need the whole grain, which, I mean, should not be that shocking because that's how God made the grain, but it was.
Yeah, no, the flour is really the issue. And if you listen to Sue Becker, like gluten's not actually a thing. I have had several people now that I've told, like, hey, I heard that if you're not actually a true celiac, like you don't have the genetic mutation for celiac disease, you can have fresh milled flour. And some of these women have gone almost 20 years with no gluten because they react so poorly to it, and they have had no issue with my fresh milled bread. I'll just like bring them a loaf and be like, just maybe if you get brave, try it. And then they always come back and they're like, that was incredible. I've never been able to have bread and not react to it. And here we are using yeast that I was convinced after a while was just so bad for you. I would feel guilty making yeast bread instead of sourdough bread, even though it's white flour. And now I'm like, no, doesn't matter. We're just gonna have fresh milled yeast bread. I can make it the same day. It's delicious. My kids love it. And we're not as hungry. We're all healthier. We all have more energy, more clarity. And the fiber is doing good things for this used to be carnivore household.
My whole house has changed because of regularity.
Yeah. I'm kind of like a purist in my kitchen with what's allowed on my countertop. For the longest time, it was like, when we lived up in Idaho, it was just my espresso machine. And then when we went fresh milled, now my mill is allowed to live on my countertop because if I keep it in the pantry, it's annoying to pull out. It's heavy and I don't want to drop it. So I think it's a big test. I think my husband knew I was really serious when I started letting the mill live on the countertop, and and it was allowed to stay.
When you told me you were going to leave it on your counter, I did a little happy dance. I was like, she's in. I did it.
I really am. I don't like visual clutter. It drives me crazy. So it was a big deal.
But it changes your life. Truly, I think if anybody is dealing with health issues, try fresh milled flour. If you don't want to buy a mill, mills are expensive. None of them, like even the cheapest of them, are not cheap. And so it is kind of an investment. But there are a lot of businesses that do actually mill their flour fresh, and as long as you're getting the whole grain version, you are getting the entire thing that you need. So there's nothing wrong with buying the flour from an actual mill. You don't have to have the mill yourself. You just want to make sure that you're keeping it in your freezer so that it doesn't go rancid, because it will slow down the oxidization, and as it sits, within the first 24 hours, it decreases with nutrients by like 50%. So you do want it fresh, ideally, but in order to see whether or not your body can handle it, you can absolutely get flour that is not milled fresh that day. It still has all the components that your body needs to digest it. It still has the bran, the germ, and the endosperm. So that's what your body actually needs in order to process it properly, is the whole thing. You won't necessarily have the full span of all of the nutrient density, but it's still a good test. It's still worth doing. So don't feel like you can't do it because you can't right now invest in a mill, or because you just don't know. You don't want to invest in an expensive mill if it's not going to work for you. I also have communicated with a lot of moms on Instagram whose children are experiencing the topical steroid withdrawal that I deal with, and their kids can't have any gluten except for fresh milled flour. And they couldn't do sourdough, but they can do fresh milled flour. Some of them can't do a lot of it. Like, there's a tolerance level for sure. They can't be eating only bread all day long because their bodies are just still sensitive. But it can be done, and I really do believe that fresh milled flour has healed my gut a lot. I think that I don't struggle with the same things as I did, or at least not to the same severity. Another thing, and this is anecdotal, this is not medical advice, but my labs, as I'm working with a doctor for my topical steroid withdrawal and some autoimmune stuff, we have to keep a really close eye on my iron levels. And my iron has gone up on its own. I had to have many iron infusions in my last pregnancy, like 10 total, I think, and my iron level did not budge. It actually continued to drop. But my iron has increased on its own and is it's on the low end still, but it's in the healthy range, which is mind-blowing. And the only thing I've done differently is change the flour that I was using.
That's crazy. I also think it's worth noting that you cannot buy this at the grocery store. This is not your whole wheat flour at the grocery store. That is not the same thing.
No, for sure. We can get into that a little bit. So even whole grain at the store, well, it has to specifically be whole grain in order to have the whole thing in it. Whole wheat is not going to be whole grain at all. It's actually very different. It is the commercially milled white flour, and then they're taking a little bit of the bran and the germ that they removed. It's actually usually just bran, not even the germ. They remove the germ because that's the fat, and that is what makes the flour go rancid. And so whole wheat is very different. Whole wheat is actually like sand, and I don't think anybody should use that flour ever, if I'm being truly honest with you. I think commercial flour, I can see why people use it. I can at least understand that. Whole wheat is just a gimmick. That is makes
It
me
never
angry.
turns out. It's not the same as milling it fresh. So we both have wheat berries in our background. They're just little, they almost look like little grains of rice, a little bigger, brown, depending on the variety. There's lots of varieties. And you stick it through your mill, whatever kind you have, and it grinds it up. And it doesn't have to be bread. Sometimes I'll crack it really coarse and we'll make cream of wheat for breakfast for my kids. They love it. I'm just boiling it in milk on the stove and you can add sweetener to it. It's delicious. It's kind of like oatmeal. I like the texture better personally, but you don't have to stick to specific breads. You can make tortillas. You really could make anything you wanted with it.
Yeah, I know Sue Becker uses it a lot for like salads. Like, she just boils the grains whole. I have not tried that yet. I actually really want to. I want to figure out a way. This is like a complicated thing. So I have a dream of doing it, but it's very involved in like popping the wheat. But you have to like parboil it, and then you have to use like sand to keep it it's a whole thing. But I want to do it. So if anybody's done it, please tell me how, because that's my dream.
I didn't know that was possible.
Popcorn, but well, yeah, because that's what puffed rice is.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah, I want to do it so bad, because imagine the nutrient density. It's like popcorn, but like really good for you.
Yeah, guys, fresh milled flour has 40 out of the 44 nutrients that you need to sustain life. So if you just have a little bit of fruit, a little bit of meat for your B12, you're good. You could pretty much live on fresh milled flour and a little bit of like raw milk.
Spelt, that variety is actually a complete amino acid. So it actually has everything.
Yes,
which is incredible. Yeah, so there's a wide variety of grains. Okay, we should talk about, though, ancient grains, because I've been actually fairly outspoken on social media, and a lot of people don't love me for it, because the ancient grain hype, I can see why people say what they say. But if you're not getting the whole grain, and a lot of people are buying, for instance, einkorn all-purpose flour, which means you're just getting the endosperm. You're literally
Yep.
only getting the carbohydrates.
Or
It's the
kamut
same as
flour, like white kamut flour, same thing. Yep.
yes,
It's not the same thing.
it's the same as commercial flour. You are not getting the benefits that they are claiming go along with ancient grains. And I feel like this is such a disservice to people because they think that they're getting something. And I have seen people that are celiac saying that they can use this flour. One, you're not celiac if that is the case. Two, you're not getting the benefits that you think you're getting. And it makes me very frustrated actually because whole grains are incredible, and whole grains are what God wanted us to be eating. And
The Bible makes it so clear that bread is what sustains life. I mean, God rained manna down for the Israelites.
the Bible does make it very clear that we should be eating bread, and bread is so important. I mean, Jesus is the bread of life, so why would that not also translate to being important in like our day-to-day diet?
Yeah, where does it say in the Bible that if you take away someone's meal, you've taken away his life? Because bread was life, and it still is. So it actually made sense to me when we switched to fresh milled flour that we are eating something biblical and the way that God intended it to be. I didn't know that wheat, even to this day, is very similar to ancient wheat from, say, Egypt. It's a perfect food. You could actually still eat the wheat from ancient Egypt as long as it hasn't been cracked. Then the fats don't get out and make it rancid. So it's the perfect food that God tells us to store up, right? That's all the way back in Genesis, where Joseph is storing up massive amounts of grain to save from the Israelites and the Egyptians from a famine. So it makes sense. It made sense to my brain when I switched to fresh milled flour that is actually something that God intended us to have. I always have had buckets of wheat berries in my basement as food
Very warm
storage
of
or
you.
whatever. And then we gave all of our wheat berries away, I think minus a couple bags, when we moved to Oklahoma in April. That was a whole thing. I felt like our food storage had become an idol, but it made sense to me that God would give us a perfect food with all the nutrients that we need that will not go bad and you can store up during times of famine.
Yeah, it's really, really amazing. There's actually, so this is a rental home, and it was owned by people with food storage. Like the whole pantry is designed to hold 5-gallon buckets. But in one of the closets upstairs, there are boxes full of like the number 10 cans of wheat, and they're older than I am.
And they're
And I
still
asked
good,
my
I'm sure.
yeah, I asked my landlord if I could use them, and she said I could. So I'm going to make bread with them. I'm very excited about it. But yeah, it is the perfect food. Stores forever. I mean, they'll tell you 30-ish years, but they have literally milled flour from ancient Egypt, and that's incredible. If you put fresh milled flour in your sourdough starter, that thing will come to life. Sourdough starter using fresh milled flour is unkillable in my opinion. Like unless it's moldy, but that's like just a safety thing. Like you could technically still revive it. It's not dead. The culture's still there. It does not die. I have not successfully killed a fresh milled flour starter, and I have given it a go. I have really tried.
That's actually a fair point. When I started doing sourdough, I actually started using rye just based off of like a YouTube video that I'd seen that said rye was better. And then I just got annoyed with having to keep rye milled, and I would keep it in my freezer just like in batches. And so I started using white flour, and my sourdough starter was never the same after that. It just never got as strong. It was way slower. And when I use a fresh milled grain, it really is unkillable. There's no better way to describe it. It's so powerful.
Yeah. So I'm not going to like die on the hill that sourdough is the very best option. And I'm also not going to say that you can't do sourdough. Like sourdough is still a very viable option for making bread. But we also don't need to feel shame, and we don't need to be locked into thinking, I have to do sourdough, because fresh milled flour alone can change your life. The other thing is the bread itself, if you're using fresh milled flour, sourdough, or commercial yeast alike, it will rise faster. So either way, it's actually a benefit because you're not having to wait 6 hours for your bread. And I mean, that is so nice. It also is incredibly convenient because if you buy enough grain, obviously, if you're going to be milling a lot of flour, you're not going to buy a little 5-pound bag of grain. You're going to be getting 50-pound bags. I just emptied one, so I have 17 5-gallon buckets full of grain. And I am like building that up. But I mean, some of that is just a little bit of my Mormon prepper history. You
I
maybe
had
don't
just
know that,
gotten away
right?
from that. Yeah, that was what my basement looked like in Idaho. We had thousands of pounds of grain down there, and I ended up just giving it to people. And now I'm trying really hard to get out of that prepper mindset, and it's hard sometimes. But this is me not being a prepper. I still have a few hundred pounds probably in my pantry.
Well, I mean, the Bible tells us to be wise and to be prepared. And obviously, it doesn't need to be an idol, yes. But if you're milling your own flour, right? If you're buying commercial flour, it will go bad after 6 months. A lot of people don't know that commercial flour does go rancid after 6 months. And so you really should not be stockpiling a ton of flour because it will go bad. But with grain, with the whole grain, you can store up as much as you want and it will not ever go bad. So it makes economical sense, especially with shipping, because shipping grain can be really, really expensive. So if you don't live in a place that's near a wheat farm where you can get it really inexpensively, it makes sense to get it in bulk. So what I did was my parents were going up to Utah and there was a place where I could buy a bunch of grain in bulk and they just drove it all back for me. So I saved a ton of money doing it that way. And it has not failed me because I have so much grain. It's coming out my ears.
And you go through a lot when you're making bread. You use a lot, more than you think you will.
Yeah, I've been really surprised actually how fast, because in just the last 3 months, I think I've emptied 2 full 5-gallon buckets. So that's a lot. And that's not even baking to like my full capacity. That's me being sick and just making the bare minimum.
I think the question that everyone is probably thinking is, so where are you going to go from here with Southworth sourdough?
So that one's a tricky one because I do love sourdough and I love teaching sourdough, but I don't buy commercial flour anymore. And so it's hard to make the content that looks like commercial bread that everybody wants, or commercial flour made bread that everybody wants to see. It looks different. And I want to be authentic and true to my beliefs and teach people what I believe is the best form of bread, and that is real bread made with whole grains. So I don't think I will get rid of my sourdough content completely. I do still keep a sourdough starter. One of my kids just really, really adores a good sourdough artisan loaf made with commercial flour. She wants the white, fluffy artisan loaves, and I can't imagine that would be worse than like a candy bar. So I will sometimes still be, I decided this today actually, I will be buying some commercial bread flour so that I can make her delicious sourdough every once in a while. It's not going to be like her main source of bread.
I think it's important to note that the white flour that you're buying is not fortified with the synthetic vitamins that a lot of white flour is fortified with, which is part of the issue with people eating it, is people are having, oftentimes it's a reaction to what they're putting into the flour.
Yes, for sure. And a lot of people are getting rancid flour and they don't even know that it's rancid. Unbleached, organic, like the best quality commercial flour that we can get is what I will be using, and it's only going to be occasionally because I feel like there's room for grace, and it doesn't have to be rigid, and I don't need to be obsessive about it. I do tend to get that way where I get really, really intense about things. So I will still be sharing some, but for the most part, we will be doing only fresh milled flour. And that is going to translate into social media where, I mean, I've had a lot of people ask, like, what's going on? You're not here anymore. And I just got a little bit confused on how to even just share all of this because even in so I have a course called my Learn to Leaven course, and in it, it was before I had started milling flour at all. And I was like, don't do sourdough with whole grains. And like, I can't really go back and like cut that out. I mean, I guess maybe I could, but it would be a whole process. Um, so it'll be a transition. I'm hoping to get back to posting a lot more regularly. I love that community. I think there's so many wonderful people there, and I love teaching there. It's just going to be looking a lot different from now on.
Still beautiful, still delicious, just not the curated white fluffy sourdough that everyone's used to.
Yeah. I think, too, a lot of people are like, why can't I make my loaf look the way that it used to? It's a completely different product. Fresh milled flour, whole grain flour, is a completely different product than commercial flour. And so we have to adjust our expectations because it is just different. Yeah,
It's
so
not a
that's
one-to-one with a recipe. You can't just substitute it the same. It's not going to behave the same way that you're used to.
yeah. In fact, actually, please go ahead and leave your questions about baking with fresh milled flour in the comments, and we will do a whole episode answering all the questions. And I'll probably put up a Q&A thing on Instagram so we can get the questions too there, and we can answer them all. Because sometimes it's nice to have the two people to bounce things back and forth. So we'll do a whole other episode on more like the practical like tips and stuff for doing the fresh milled flour. So yeah, that's where we stand. But Hannah, you're getting on social media now too, aren't you?
I am learning to dabble. I feel like a grandma, like entering into social media after over a decade of not touching it. And I'm like constantly asking you dumb questions about like how do you post this? And what kind of content do people look for on these different platforms? But yes, I will be braving social media with my new, I guess, channels. What do you call them? My new platform?
Yeah, I don't even know,
The grandma in
honestly.
me doesn't even know what they're called, so.
Well, I'm a grandma too, so.
But if you would like to follow along, it's not going to be as beautifully curated as Audrianna's content yet. But it's called Whole Grain Harvest, and I will post all things fresh milled flour and Jesus.
I love it. I will be your first follower.
Thank you.
All right, well, that's a wrap on that one, and we're so excited to be building this community. It's going to be so fun to be able to talk all about Jesus and bread all the time.
Yes, because Jesus is the bread of life.
Exactly. All right, please subscribe, follow along, leave us comments, always be nice. Remember who you are, and return with honor. And we hope that you will taste and see that the Lord is good.
Bye.